The forward assist. Designed to help with the earlier 1960s M16 reliability problems, it has one fatal flaw, which is that it continuously sparks debate for nearly 60 years now after its invention. Chances are, if you've ever heard anything about the forward assist beyond the forward assist is used to close the bolt, it's probably wrong. It may be surprising to hear this, but consider that pretty much anything you've probably heard about it beyond its operational statement has, well, no supporting evidence. It consists almost entirely of zero citation website articles, casually amateur YouTube videos, and tediously long podcasts, all corroborating what boils down to a fudlore circle jerk of awful speculatory guesswork and historical events that appear to belong in an alternate reality. I know you're probably thinking I'm exaggerating, but these critics really do say things like Eugene Stoner was forced to make the forward assist by Army boogeymen, when the reality is, he never made one. Again, this is a bold claim on my part. Don't worry though, all of my points will be demonstrated, cited, or both within the video as it goes along. As I break down all the popular claims against the forward assist, my intent is to reveal the true nature of the charlatan acts perpetrated against a mere tiny button that never did anything to those people in the first place. For the first article of our consideration, we'll be looking at whether the forward assist warranted adoption. I'll often be referencing the Congressional hearings that took place in 1967 about the M16 program management. These are often referred to as the Ickard hearings. I'll also be referencing military tests. Both of these will be cited in the description below. The first objection against adoption typically goes like this. The adoption of the forward assist was merely on psychological grounds and was not empirically warranted. Chris Bartocci of Small Arms Review further adds a more interesting and even more seemingly original point. He says, even the M14 manuals state not to force a round into the chamber. This is from his article called The M16 in Vietnam. Now let's consider these objections. The U.S. Army Testing Command, often abbreviated as TCOM in military documents, conducted a test of the various forward assist mechanism designs submitted by Colt and Springfield Armory in November of 1963 and found that the frequency of a need to fully close the bolt occurred enough under adverse conditions that a method of manually closing the bolt was warranted. What makes Chris's point interesting is that during the congressional hearings, the Army actually referred to this specific point he brought up in anticipation of such an argument. In it, they stated that while the M14 manual does state to never force a bolt closed under normal conditions, FM 23-5 for the M1 Garand states in paragraph 12b that it's okay to do so when loading a full clip to fully close and lock the bolt when necessary. Secondly, while reading the Army's position for developing the forward assist, they cited a psychological need as well as multiple test analyses to justify the development of the forward assist before the TCOM trials. Another argument commonly seen is that Stoner himself was against the addition of a forward assist and was forced to design one on the express demand of the Army. In this case, Carl and Ian from InRange TV further add to this claim in that Stoner made a ratcheting design that was incorporated into a prototype charging handle. However, the Army went with the cheaper and more expedient option of the extant forward assist.
And it's also worth pointing out that Stoner himself was against the addition.
He was?
He did it only on the express request or demand of the Army. The Air Force never did.
They never wanted it.
Yeah.
They landed up getting it as a result. The Army strong-armed him. And he was actually Stoner's design for the forward assist when he was forced to design one. Mm-hmm. It turned out not to be this button initially. It was a ratcheting system built into the charging system,
right,
in which you could pull it back and it would ratchet, and then you could force the charging handle forward. That makes more sense to me. And
potentially.
I can see where Stoner was going with that, but this was easier and more expedient, so they ended up going with the button.
Yeah.
This argument rests against the Army forcing changes such as the forward assist onto the M16. The Army managed the Product Improvement Program, or PIP for short, that would later eventually become the M16A1. However, not everything in the Product Improvement Program was forced into adoption, such as the spring-loaded firing pin, which immediately cast doubt on the claims that the Army had a blind intent on forcing things they wanted without merit. The original allegation against the Army forcing the forward assist is hearsay. More interestingly, the Army did not force Stoner to design anything, as Stoner never designed any forward assist mechanism to begin with. Stoner only and merely recommended using a charging handle-based forward assist device on the sole basis that it could be removed from the rifle at a later time. Stoner speaks about the forward assist in his own words here. Ironically, when you would think that Ian and Carl's statement is already exceedingly wrong enough for people who receive not an insubstantial amount of money per month to shovel such well-researched information at you, they still have more to be wrong about. When a further look at those alternate forward assist designs is conducted, their function is based solely on a leaf-sprung mechanism and a modified charging handle. This charging handle acts against a modified bolt carrier that had a spring-loaded pin and a housing located where the familiar gas key fasteners are. Further adding to the irony, the extant forward assist is the only one that actually ratchets, as I shall demonstrate. If you just hold, if it's stuck closed, your bolt can cycle just fine. It just ratchets, as long as your charging handle doesn't get caught on anything when it's locked back. So you can go ahead, the whole thing, it's fine. So Carl and Ian are completely wrong to talk about the forward assist. I'm not sure where they got their information from, but they are either confused, have bad sources, or just made it up. If it is by confusion that their error is made, they should reconsider their attempts to speak with authority on the subject. If it is their source that is an error, they should reconsider their ability to research and select sources. If it is by lack of research or false statement, I think no further comment would be required of their character and conduct. As to which one it is, I'll leave it to you to decide. A third objection I see is that the Air Force opposed the forward assist and that the Army had to force the military to use an unwanted device. This argument predicates on the character or virtue of the Air Force, as well as their authority in knowledgeable matters of the M16, especially when compared to the Army. There are a number of issues with this kind of thinking that deals with both the intent and competency of the Air Force. When the factors are considered together, they reveal that the Air Force was woefully unfit and self-serving at the expense of others, namely the Army and Marines. But first, we need to understand the Air Force's background on the reasons why they wanted the M16 in the first place, and how it later related to the M16 problems of Vietnam. This may seem tangential at first, but is important to be thorough so that we can ascertain an overall character of the Air Force, or lack thereof. The Air Force was equipped with leftover M2 carbines and other such dated guns, like the M3 submachine gun after the Korean War, and they wanted something more effective that also wasn't a hand-me-down from the World War II and Korean campaigns. After General Curtis LeMay saw an AR-15 demonstration at a birthday party he attended, the Air Force then decided to order it, and so began the testing and trials for what would become the M16. The next thing of interest to happen was that the original powder, IMR 4475, could not be mass-produced while meeting the advertised velocity and chamber pressure specifications. This testimony from DuPont goes on for a while, so I'll just cite it, along with all my other figures, in the description below. The thing to take away here is that the manufacturers loading IMR 4475 could not cherry-pick lots anymore and hope that the customer wouldn't notice velocity deficits, as the production went from small scale during the initial acquisition of the AR-15 to maximizing DuPont's production rate capability. What was happening was, the chamber pressures were as high as possibly allowed to meet the velocity requirements, and there was an issue of blown primers from the excessive pressure. The Air Force wanted a powder that would stop giving them blown primers, so they sought to authorize an alternative. They were the first to purchase ball powder, as well as the ones who asked for it authorized exclusively by default. They had it for 2 years, were happy with it, and found no malfunctions due to the increased cyclic rate. They admitted to not being thorough enough in their testing to identify this. Because of this lack of thoroughness, the problem wasn't found until late 1965 by the Army in the Small Arms Weapons Systems experiment. Another good write-up of most of this is available at looserounds.com, which I'll link below. How was it that the Air Force wasn't thorough enough? It's simple. The Air Force was already tired of the delays due to the IMR ammunition and rushed their tests of ball powder so they could get a powder that wasn't rupturing primers. Supposedly, they had their best men testing this, which means either the Air Force didn't care about cyclic rate issues or wasn't competent enough to run a thorough test which would have found the faults that the Small Arms Weapons Systems test did 2 years later by the Army. It is a readily identifiable issue that with the old, lighter Edgewater style of buffer and a full auto M16 firing ball powder loaded M193 that there is enough bolt bounce and bolt velocity to cause a number of issues. It is interesting to note some of the other instances of Air Force small arms programs during that period. Consider also the situation at Hamilton Air Force Base all the way into at least 1967. This was the last base that airmen would go to if they had not been trained on the M16 before deployment to Vietnam. The item of interest is that all the instructors here were neither combat veterans nor had even toured Vietnam. It is quite an interesting situation to have instructors with no real-world experience teaching a great swath of airmen on the use of the M16. It is not hard to extrapolate that the Air Force didn't put anywhere near the emphasis of testing and validating the M16 in real-world conditions as the Army did. What I mean by all of this is that the Air Force was not making decisions for the M16 on the basis of whether or not it was warranted for frontline combat, but rather their decisions were solely to expedite M16 delivery to their own inventories and for their own purposes. It was not on the basis of whether their decisions would give a worse rifle for the other services or for frontline combat conditions. It was on the basis of whether or not the rifle was acceptable for guard duty use in much less demanding circumstances than the Army and Marines would and did encounter. They were careless about testing ball powder, they were careless about training their airmen, and they were never concerned about the other services' needs. Notice here how they recommend against the forward assist on the justification that it isn't necessary for their purposes. Just so we also have the record clear on the matter of the military's consensus, the Marines and Navy were both of the opinion that they thought the forward assist to be not necessary but desirable if it could be developed without adversely affecting normal operation of the rifle, and that they would consider adoption in that case. The Air Force was the only service to protest the development of the forward assist, and as I have demonstrated earlier, they were not in a position to have done so. It is also said that the forward assist is an expensive addition to the rifle. The forward assist raised the cost of the rifle by $4.53, which is $37.59 in today's money, from $121.84 to $126.37. In today's money, that would be from $1,010.95 to $1,048.54, which is a 3.72% increase. This figure actually went down slightly later in procurement, but this was the initial contract negotiated price. For the second article of our consideration, I will be focusing on whether the forward assist causes, and is the source of, some problems to the operation of the AR-15. A common argument against the use of the forward assist is that shoving around into the chamber is likely to be the cause of further issues. This is said by a multitude of people such as Chris Bartocci of Small Arms Review, Aaron Cowan of Sage Dynamics.
And what I found with my experience with the forward assist is it doesn't really do anything that you want it to do. In fact, it could cause more problems. So the idea is if the bolt carrier group, even extremely dirty, which this rifle is, does not go fully into battery, then I can give my little forward assist a little tappy tap taparoo.
And with exceptional elegance by Carl Casarda of InRange TV. Here's what amounts to his QED.
Someone said that if you say that the forward assist is useless, that you don't know how to run your rifle, that you're just standing around at an indoor range plinking or whatever, and you're not running your rifle. So let me go ahead and say this. I don't think the forward assist is useless. It can make malfunctions worse, so therefore it does have a function. But I do think it's stupid. But in regards to running the rifle, I want to show commenters that say stuff like that I do know how to run my rifle.
Look!
running my rifle!
The main concern here is establishing a causal relationship, or lack thereof, between using the forward assist to correct a failure of the bolt to fully close, historically abbreviated as an FBC, and some kind of malfunction. The kind of malfunctions these arguments predicate on would, chiefly, be a failure to extract, often abbreviated as an FTE. So, if, under specific conditions, a relationship between the use of the forward assist and specific failures to extract could be made where the originating cause was the use of the forward assist exclusively, this argument would hold true. The opposing consideration would be that the same failures to extract occur independently of the use of the forward assist because they are endemic to the specific conditions the rifle is subjected to. Enough conjecture. Let's take a look at the test data of the 1963 TCOM trials to see if one or the other could hold true. In this test, they used 5 rifles. 3 of them are listed as CHD, for charging handle device, referring to the aforementioned charging handle-based forward assist that Carl is confused about. 2 of them are listed as PD, for plunger device, which is the extant style of forward assist we are familiar with today, aside from the button surface area being slightly smaller. The results are broken down by number of malfunctions per 20-round magazine. Because of this, we will be able to have enough resolution in the test data to determine with a high degree of confidence what the causal relationship is between the forward assist, test conditions, and the failures to extract. The first test they conducted was the dust test. Each rifle was cleaned and lubricated with Mil L 644B oil. The rifle was fully loaded, set on safe, and the dust cover closed. The rifle was then placed in the dust chamber and exposed to a dust blast for 1 minute, top side up, and then 1 minute upside down. The TCOM document I linked below goes further into the composition and method of dispersing the sand, mud, and cold conditions, if that is of interest to you. Each of the 5 rifles was subjected to 3 courses of fire with a fully loaded 20-round magazine per course. This test, as well as the others, also illustrates the ineffectiveness of the charging handle designs that Carl erroneously attributes to Stoner. Looking at the results, we have 3 failures to extract and 4 failures of the bolt to close in total. 3 of the failures of the bolt to close could not be corrected by the charging handle device, as they could not fully close the bolt. In 2 of those instances, pressure from the thumb was able to close the bolt. In the third occurrence, the bolt was not able to be closed, the rifle had to be mortared to extract the round, and several attempts were made to chamber the next rounds without success. This third occurrence and the subsequent chambering stoppages all happened on a rifle without a single round being previously forced into the chamber and fired. The fourth occurrence of the failure of the bolt to close was with a plunger device, where it successfully chambered the round and fired it without an extraction issue. In summary, we have 3 failures to extract and 3 failures of the bolt to close that were then rectified through forcing the bolt closed. Only 2 of the failures to extract could even be attributed to the 3 times the bolt was forced closed, as the third failure to extract occurred independently. With a small sample size, it's hard to state anything definitively so far other than it is less than a certainty when forcing a round into the chamber that it will cause a failure to extract. Next, we shall take a look at the mud test, which will give us a much better understanding of this relationship. The mud test had the rifle submerged in a mud mixture of 10 pounds red clay, 2 pounds clean river sand, and 8 quarts of water for 15 seconds with the dust cover shut and the muzzle tape closed. Each of the 5 rifles, again, went through 3 courses of fire with a fully loaded 20-round magazine. There is quite a lot more malfunctions in this test, with 112 failures to extract coupled with 39 failures of the bolt to close on just the charging handle device rifles alone. These 3 rifles fired 180 times in total for this mud test. Of those 39 failures for the bolt to close, the bolts were not able to be closed 32 times exclusively by force against the charging handle and needed thumb pressure as well to help chamber a round. Of the 112 failures to extract, 39 of them could be attributed to forcing the bolt closed. Of the 2 plunger type forward assist rifles, 116 failures to extract occurred, and there were 70 occasions on which the bolt did not fully close. These 2 rifles fired 120 times in total for this mud test. Each of those 70 times the bolt failed to close, there is also a failure to extract that could be attributed. Each time the plunger was depressed, it was able to close the bolt successfully. Breaking those occasions down, the thumb was used on the plunger 31 times, 21 times with the heel of the hand, and 18 times by bumping the plunger head against a block of wood. It is evident that a large variance of force was used from lighter to very heavy applications of force. The biggest reason why the heel of the hand wasn't used as much was because the forward assist striking surface area was smaller than even the M16A2 style many are familiar with today, and it was painful to apply a more generous amount of force. One of the recommendations of TCOM was to enlarge the surface area, which eventually led to the teardrop forward assist of the M16A1. So looking at the big picture here, we have 109 total instances for all rifles of forcing the bolt closed, and each time having the possibility of attributing a failure to extract. This was out of 228 total failures to extract during a 300 round course of fire. So if we assume 109 failures to extract were caused by the forward assist out of 300, we would have a maximal 48% chance of inducing a failure to extract from using the forward assist. Remember, this is if we were to assume those failures to extract were exclusive to forcing the bolt closed and were not going to happen anyway. Now, what if we were to continue to assume the worst case of advocacy for the forward assist here, where we remove all possibly attributed failures to extract as well as the shots fired from forcing the bolt closed from the totals? We end up with 119 failures to extract exclusive from forcing the bolt closed with 191 rounds fired. This would give us a minimum 62% chance of failure to extract when removing the factor of using the forward assist in this test, and more if we were to acknowledge that some uses of the forward assist didn't have or were not causal to a failure to extract. So it actually went up, which is completely contrary to what anyone would have ever told you about it. The most simple explanation for this is demonstrated in the first magazine fired by rifle number 013060. For the 20 rounds it fired, it had 19 failures to extract, with only a single instance of forcing the bolt closed. This would give it a 90% chance of failure to extract, independent of the use of the forward assist. Again, the rate is higher than the overall with the inclusive use of the forward assist. What is immediately apparent is that the cause or causes of failures to extract are independent of the use of the forward assist, because even if you omitted the use of the forward assist and if you were able to chamber another round, you are not avoiding any real likelihood of failure to extract, because the case was more than likely going to be stuck in the chamber anyways if you managed to shoot another round. Attempting to chamber a new round does not remove the extant conditions that cause the bolt not to close in the first place. This consideration seems like a good explanation, as 3 magazines had all 20 rounds fail to extract, 7 magazines had 19 rounds fail to extract, 1 had 18, and 2 had 17, which is 13 out of the 15 magazines used for this mud test. Every single magazine also had significantly more failures to extract than uses of the forward assist. Also consider that if the chamber was in a good condition, but the failure of the bolt to close was due to some frictional or obstructive element towards the feeding portion of the rifle cycle, that it would not cause a failure to extract. It would also not cause any more further failure than trying to re-rack the charging handle if this frictional and or obstructive element had an enduring presence, such as a muddy rifle, requiring an untimely cleaning or deliberate remedial action to remove the originating cause. Okay, now some of you may still be thinking there could be a very small chance of a condition where the forward assist could be exclusively causal to a failure to extract at a very low rate, and that the dust and mud tests don't have enough data resolution to rule this slight possibility out. It would be at such a low rate where it would not be evident for when I was controlling for the use of the forward assist and failures to extract for the mud test. This is still a reasonable position to hold, and accounts for the forward assist being an overall good mechanism to use. If I may attempt to remove all doubt, I will proceed to the results of TCOM's extreme cold test to put those notions to rest. In the extreme cold test, the rifles were subjected to negative 65 degrees Fahrenheit for 12 hours and were fired a total of 600 times each. Of these 600 times, they were shot 100 rounds at a time with 2 hours in between firing. In addition, they were also hand-cycled 500 rounds each to simulate the charging of the first round in a magazine for a 10,000 round quantity. In total, there were 20 failures of the bolt to close and only 2 failures to extract between both types of forward assist devices out of 3,000 rounds fired. The test results also showed that the charging handle devices were inadequate to fully chamber all the rounds on their own, while the plunger type forward assist worked without issue. Notice how the number of failures to extract is an order of magnitude lower than the number of times the bolt failed to close. It can be reasonably concluded then that the use of the forward assist is decoupled from any significant correlation and thus causality with failure to extract. It is evident that both failures of the bolt to close and failures to extract can only be linked to the common environmental conditions the rifle is subjected to, and that the forward assist clearly has no real bearing on the likelihood of the case failing to extract. Further, it is a short-sighted correlation and causation fallacy to link the two when they happen simultaneously. It then becomes apparent that the forward assist should be used if expediency in firing is a significant factor for the user, as a remedial action such as cleaning the rifle at such a specific time is often unpractical. Regarding the Rock Island Arsenal test that proved the forward assist was bad, I asked Chris Bartocci via email about this testing he mentioned in his article. I'd never come across this test, or heard it referenced anywhere. Chris never replied to me. I'm just going to assume it never happened. Regarding Aaron Cowan's statement about the case head separation, the forward assist can actually be used in some cases to extract a broken case. Forcing a new round into the occupied chamber can give an interference fit inside of the old hollow case and allow you to actually extract both the new round along with the old case all at once. That's right, the forward assist can actually be one expedient solution to fixing this problem. I originally heard about this in a YouTube comment that is now lost to me from time and obscurity. I, however, came across a different individual that posted about his experience with this technique on AR15.com. He was kind enough to leave us pictures for posterity. The original thread is linked in the description below. Another objection, although uncommon, is that the gun could suffer some sort of catastrophic failure if the forward assist is pressed simultaneously while shooting. It also serves as a gas leakage point as well as a possible safety issue. Both of these issues are stated by Carl.
There are a couple other things that we became aware of while trying to investigate the forward assist. And actually some of our collaboration with PNS brought this out. I have never seen this, but it came up in one of our talks with them, or at least it did in one I was in. They have actually seen a situation in which someone was firing around a barrier and had the forward assist wedged against the wall. So they brought it around and then brought the gun back, and the forward assist was depressed forward.
Without them realizing it.
And fired the gun.
That's a bad thing.
Turns out that's catastrophic because the bolt tries to cycle, and then those teeth are then going against the forward assist. This whole part shatters, it breaks major components, and the gun's down. And I'd never heard of that, but when that came up on the PNS discussion, I was like, that's a fascinating failure point.
That really could kind of happen.
The other thing that I have seen or experienced, and this may or may not correlate to people's experiences in the audience, is that now as a right-hander, irrelevant, as a left-hander, especially in suppressed rolls, which by the way we have other discussions about suppressed rolls on ARs, which is a separate video, this is a gas leakage point. Not always, but somewhat.
Potentially.
It's also a problem if there is a catastrophic event in that you now have an opening here and some metal parts that are held in with a pin and a spring that can blow out in that event.
Right. So these are all very unlikely situations, but if you're not really getting any real benefit from having the button there in the first place, why even have the possibility of these other things happening?
This allegation originated on primary and secondary and was repeated by Carl, but since several-hour podcasts are a poor format for referencing non-index information, I'm not going to bother to go into that kind of funhouse to look for the original. One interesting thing to note is that the story predicates on the shooter being unaware he was pressing the forward assist at the time of firing. If that were the case, how did he reach the conclusion that it was the forward assist if he didn't know he was pressing it in the first place? It'd be nice to see some pictures, but it's doubtful these kind of claims will ever have any evidence to even refute, let alone make a cohesive argument. This issue of a depressed forward assist was foreseen and tested during the 1963 TCOM trials and corroborated recently on the Military Arms Channel video, which I will link in the description below. The TCOM test used 5 layers of tape to keep the forward assist pressed forward while firing. They also used some kind of battery alligator clip which was ejected 6 to 8 feet away after firing with 0 damage observed to the rifle. From the very beginning, the Army wanted to ensure that the forward assist would not pose a safety risk or that it would risk damaging the rifle. This is made even more evident by the cook-off test trials also conducted at the same time for the specific risk applicable to the charging handle devices. Regarding gas leakage, consider that there is a massive gaping hole on the right side of the receiver called the ejection port, and that significantly more gas will come out of the charging handle to receiver gaps than the barely detectable amount coming out of the forward assist housing. Regarding the issue of safety during a catastrophic failure event, I went ahead and took a survey of every overpressure event I could find on the internet that also showed the forward assist housing. Here's what I found. Notice here how the bolt carriers explode, the receiver splits apart, and not a single forward assist housing or device was damaged. The common theme here is that the excessive pressure is localized to the front, just rear of the chamber. The bolt carrier group explodes, and the receiver splits apart at the front, and then it rips apart at the rear of the receiver as well, so that both receiver sidewalls separate, or attempt to, from the gun. It is interesting to note here that the polymer lowers suffered greater failure than the aluminum ones. If someone was truly concerned about safety, it would do them well to rethink a polymer lower receiver. The third article of our consideration is whether the forward assist is not necessary, as it can be circumvented either by re-racking the charging handle or by pressing forward on the bolt carrier cutout. It is also said that in some cases, the forward assist, by design, cannot be useful in certain circumstances. The first objection asserts that it is not necessary because you can simply use your thumb to press forward on the bolt carrier dust cover cutout.
The thing people are going to say, they're going to say, what if I want to close the bolt quietly and slowly with a round in the chamber? And my answer to that would be, there is actually a little cutout on the bolt itself.
There's a couple answers to
that. Right.
Hold on. So
right there.
Now this happens to be a lightweight carrier, not the one we're certifying. It's just what's in here right now. You can, when it's not hot, push on this.
Yep.
That's there. However, there's a couple other things I'd like to say about that. I don't know how often that's a need.
Approximately never, except when you're discussing it online.
The other one that comes up is a press check. So you bring the bolt back, you look at what's in there, and a properly maintained AR-15, when you let this go, would go right back into battery.
Yes.
If it's not going into battery, there's other problems with your gun or ammunition or things that you should be looking into.
Yep.
And I realize that in the military, a lot of stuff has not been maintained properly, and therefore...
That's putting it mildly.
That's a problem, but that's not a problem with the design we're trying to apply here.
Right.
If negligence is going to be your standard modus operandi, the AR-15 is not a good gun to go with in the first place.
Get an AK.
AR-15s require some level of maintenance.
Right.
Not necessarily cleaning maintenance, but cyclical maintenance. Like, has this spring been in there since 1969? You might have a problem. And if that was your experience in the military, the problem isn't the design. And this forward assist fixing that problem is masking a bigger issue.
Thumbing the cutout does not provide sufficient force to even chamber around in some cases that the forward assist can provide, as I shall demonstrate. Please excuse the fact that this and some preceding videos were recorded hastily a long time ago, just before one of my overseas deployments, and before I had a coherent script. We're going to go ahead, try and get it to close, and so now I can't even get it. The scallop is not enough. I cannot apply enough force to get the bolt to go into battery with the scallop. And this is a relatively clean and dry bolt, freshly lubed. Hopefully you don't have an O-ring on your extractor to help with tension on there, but with the forward assist, it's a little bit easier. I can do it with one finger now. I can even palm it too. In my haste, I perhaps poorly explained my extractor spring setup, so allow me to reiterate. For short barrel guns, such as my 10.3-inch rifle that has a mil-spec gas port of 70 thousandths of an inch, it is necessary to have increased extractor tension provided by an O-ring or stronger extractor spring because of the necessarily short dwell time. Otherwise, the extractor can slip off a case. I consulted Naval Special Warfare Center Crane's publication regarding their configuration of 10.3-inch barreled Mark 18s, so this arrangement is neither unique nor uncommon, especially for military rifles. The amount of force applied to the forward assist, especially with the heel of the hand, far exceeds what can be directly applied to the bolt carrier with the thumb. This is without considering that a person's thumb and or the carrier might be wet, oily, muddy, icy, hot, or otherwise in some condition where a thumb might slip or is unable to apply sufficient force to chamber around. On the other hand, any one of those issues does not mitigate the ability to force the bolt closed when using the forward assist. Take notice that when using the heel of the hand, the force applied to the forward assist is roughly double the force a thumb is able to apply to the forward assist. It stands to reason then that you can apply well over double the force through the forward assist than what is possible with the thumb on the cutout. TCOM was gracious enough to measure the force generated using the forward assist with both the heel of the hand and the thumb for comparison. A second objection is that you can simply just use the charging handle to eject and chamber a new round. In some cases, you would be attempting to load a round multiple times without success, such as in the TCOM dust test. There's also the possibility of inducing a double feed if the next round in the magazine presents itself enough and the bolt is retracted enough, as I shall demonstrate. Now normally, I guess if you didn't have one or you're an opponent of the forward assist, you would just re-rack your charging handle again. But which would normally work and usually not be an issue. But if you were, for whatever reason, it got stuck right here and you already had a round out of the magazine, you would just be introducing a double feed in that scenario. So again, we see it happen during a cold weather test.
Замерзла. Здесь вообще кусок льда. Предохранитель крутится. Кнопка сброса не работает. Не закрылась. Двойная подача. Типичная для арт-системы двойная подача. Очень тяжело устранимая проблема. Достали. Здесь нет патронов больше. Возьму другой магазин. Вот этот, например. Работает. Не закрыл. Не закрыл. Не закрыл. Закрыл. Спортивная работает тоже только после прогрева.
It stands to reason then that the forward assist can be a faster alternative that will not induce a double feed. A third objection is that the forward assist won't help if the bolt is stuck towards the rear of its cycling movement, such as when the bolt gets stuck on the rear of the magazine when it is attempting to strip a round during the feeding cycle. Both Carl and Aaron Cowan mention this.
Now what I have is a failure to properly feed. It's not quite a double feed, but it's also not a tap rack. The mass is going to feel differently. Can this occur? I see it happen on dirty guns where maybe the round just won't go in or the bolt doesn't completely close. And the forward assist, for all its good intentions, doesn't usually help in this situation. In fact, it's not going to help at all because the bolt carrier group is too far back. In this situation, my push-pull rack is not going to help. If I felt the mass, if I identified the malfunction by feel, then that's going to shortcut my ability to fix it. I'm going to get to it a lot quicker. You can do the roll and look, and now I can see directly into the chamber while still maintaining an eye on my threat. If that's the method you want to use, I can strip that magazine. If I need to keep it, I want to hold on to it, work it back, clear that media, and at that point I can reinsert the magazine and then reassess my threat.
This is the most egregiously ignorant thing to say about the forward assist. When Foster Sturtevant was designing the forward assist at Colt, he made the notches run the length of the carrier's cycling movement so the forward assist could be used at any point during cycling, as attested to in his patent. What's even more puzzling is that both of these individuals could have easily tested this before making such a statement, as I shall demonstrate. I'm going to take apart this right here, take the buffer spring out. So here we have loaded magazine. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you exactly how this works. So once the bolt is all the way back to about here, it's kind of where it comes into play with the magazine. Once the bolt hits about here, the forward assist is engaging its paw on these little scallops right here. So when Foster E. Sturtevant was making this, I'll go ahead and show you just an overlay of the patent. But he made it on the design so it worked for the entire operation cycle of the bolt. So I mean, it's already the fact that people saying it doesn't work when it's towards the rear and like catching on the first round, that's already kind of you could just test it on your by yourself. You could just literally go and put the bolts in here, just like so. So you go pull it back, and then just kind of let the bolt. So it just touched the first round and it's stuck. Does it work or not? Well, here it goes. Oh, look at that. It's starting to pick up the first round and it goes all the way into battery. Right now, if there's a spring, it'd have already pushed it into battery. And the angle here is a little funny, but you can go ahead and put quite a bit of force on the forward assist. There is no excuse for such a specious statement. It is evident that both of these individuals obviously lack a basic understanding of how the forward assist works, and thus calls into question their ability to properly assess it. There are some further considerations if you are interested in the forward assist. For instance, the A2 round style forward assist seen on modern AR-15s have a lip that runs outward around the edge of the button. This lip can make using the right side of an ambidextrous charging handle uncomfortable if you happen to drag your knuckles along the forward assist housing. An older style teardrop forward assist eliminates this lip as well as adds extra surface area so that it has a variety of reasons making it more comfortable to use. A further point about the teardrop forward assist is that the surplus Colt ones have a slightly different facing angle than the reproduction teardrop forward assist, and I find them to be much more comfortable. It may be worth picking up a Colt one if you can find one. Otherwise, filing the edges of the reproductions has been a much cheaper and a decent fix in my experience. It is also a good idea to check if your bolt carrier forward assist notches are mil-spec, as certain proprietary shaped carriers often omit lengths of the notches, which would be a detriment to the forward assist function. To conclude, it's important to get the facts and the story straight on the forward assist, as it has been maligned for far too long and on grounds far too shaky. While I don't claim it's perfect and solves everything, I do, however, claim that I haven't seen a valid criticism of it yet.